David.
Good evening, everybody. This is the Prague Piano Webcast, and this is the 7th edition of it. My name is David Kalhous. I'm the director of the festival. I'm here with Jihye Chang again, my co-moderator. It's really nice to see you, Jihye, and of course, with our guest, OLGA VINOKUR. And we're really happy to have her. This is something we have been planning for quite a while, and I'm glad. It's finally happening. I have known Olga for quite a while, actually. We met in Israel many years ago. It was 1995, I think, 96. So it's been quite time, and we lost touch for a bit, and then we kind of met again, and we reunited kind of in New York and played some concerts together. And she's a wonderful artist, someone I really enjoy playing with and talking to about music. So Olga, welcome. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me. It's real fun. Thank you so much.
Of course, and so we should. There's so many things we can talk about. But I thought maybe we can start at the very beginning. If you can talk to us a bit about your musical upbringing, your musical journey, so to speak. Growing up, in communist Russia, then going to Israel, then going to America. This is, of course, a big topic, but if you could paint a picture of your musical journey in 5 minutes, what would it be like?
Yeah, well, I mean, I grew up in Russia and just was one of those kids who, like to sing and dance in the pre-K. And so my parents noticed that I probably maybe have some talents to music. And so they decided to introduce me to some piano teacher, local piano teacher, who said, she should audition for music school. And I went to audition to music school. You needed to be accepted. So I was accepted, and I continued to study with this piano teacher. My parents are not musicians, so it was just, regular training in the beginning, until it was very generous from my teacher, who said, you know what, I think, she would not benefit anymore from my training. She should go to somebody more, advanced, maybe to specialized music school. And it was so nice from her, because she was a wonderful woman and I dearly loved her, but and there was another teacher from conservatory who would come to our school and just pick up maybe 1 or 2 students and, start teaching more advanced, in a more advanced level. I didn't want to go to specialized music school because I studied in specialized English school, which I absolutely loved. And I had all my friends. So my parents wouldn't want to, push me to that direction, even though I already had a teacher from there. So I decided just to go with this teacher from conservatory. And that's how it started. I started to, have much more intense training with all the preparations for some competitions and things like that. And that's how my journey started. Then I gradually moved from there to sort of specialized music high school, continuing studying with her. And after I finished, I decided that I would like to study maybe somewhere else, maybe in some other country. But I didn't want to leave that Russian tradition, and because I loved it. So my aunt at the time lived in Israel, and she called and said, I've heard about this great professor who teaches in musical academy in Tel Aviv, and he's from Moscow. He's a student of Henry Neuhaus, and he used to, before he migrated to Israel, he used to teach in Moscow conservatory or Gnesin school. I don't remember exactly, but he's really good teacher. Why don't you come study with him? I was so excited. My parents were not, especially my father was a little bit skeptical, because he didn't want to let me go. But I insisted, and that's how I left to Israel. And I was accepted to musical academy and to study with Victor Derevyanko. That was the professor who, my aunt mentioned to me. And he had an assistant who was a former student, Natasha Tatson, and she was a fantastic pianist. She was one of those rare virtuosos. And I met her and I studied also with her, and it was the most fruitful time of my life. I did my bachelor's and artist diploma, and I lived there almost 6 years. And then I decided, well, maybe I should continue in my journey and I will go somewhere else. And I said, okay, I'll try to go to United States to audition. If I'm accepted, if I get scholarship, which I really needed, I'll go and study there. So I auditioned for 2-3 schools, and I was accepted. I got every scholarship. So I went to study to Manhattan School of Music in New York. I actually was debating between a New England Conservatory and Manhattan School of Music because I had almost the same offer. And I almost went to Boston because I really loved the city, very European looking city. And I had a very good experience while I was auditioning there. But in the end, my mother said, you have to be in New York for music, for art. You don't want to lose this opportunity. So I said, yes, I'm going to Manhattan. And I studied with Salomon Mikovsky, did my master's degree there and my doctorate degree at Manhattan School of Music. And since then, I live in New York, and I never regretted that move. So it was great. That's my musical educational journey.
That was brilliant. See, you're very concise. I mean, I'm sure that many things happen.
You told me 5 minutes. I was looking at the clock.
You're brilliant, because sometimes we have guests. You ask a question and they talk for 25 minutes. So
Right. Yes, I like to do it by the clock.
And this was wonderful. So when we started preparing this podcast, actually I talked with you, Olga, and I also talked with Jihye, because one of the running themes in this podcast, is musical pianistic schools, and how do pianists play, how they're influenced, by their teachers and by their surroundings, because this is something that interests young people quite a lot, especially in today's world, in which everything is kind of mixed together, right? But you're one of those people who really kind of went through the Russian training. You had almost exclusively Russian teachers. Is that correct?
Well, almost, yes, except in Manhattan School of Music. He's a Cuban teacher, but he trained in Juilliard in New York. Yeah. But most of my, but I came already to New York for my master's, so it was kind of after I got this foundation that was kind of in me very strongly. Right. Yes, I can consider myself as Russian school because most of my teachers were Russian tradition. So yes, I definitely belong to that group.
So, throughout this series of webcasts that we've been doing, we've talked quite a bit about what exactly is different about Russian school. And so my husband is a violinist and he studied with Russian teachers mainly. And so I recognize the way he holds the bow, for example, is very different from which one is the bow arm? Yeah, so it's it's different from the American bow hold. And I think the Belgian is also very different. So for string players, there are these like distinctive look on the way that they hold the bow and how they use the bow. But on the piano playing, I don't think it's as like obvious as that. So do you think you have something that you recognized as a pianist and as a student who studied with mainly Russian teachers and also as a teacher? Like, what would you describe? And I have vague ideas through talking to various pianists, but what would you say that is very significant?
Yeah, I totally agree actually about this because I had this very intense training of Russian pedagogue, and one of them was, like I mentioned, Natasha Tatson, who was a brilliant pianist, is one of those virtuosos who could play all 24 etudes, Chopin etudes, and record them, all 12 transcendental Liszt etudes, and record them, Hammer clavier, everything, all those giants in piano repertoire, she just could play with ease. And not only it was wonderful to watch her doing, but she also was a great teacher who could transfer her knowledge and her virtuosity to her students. So I had this very, very intense training with her. I mean, it was very intimate, very intense, almost like in a sort of a bubble of that, great experience. We were also very good friends. And it was all about physicality in terms of how, because there are many great teachers who would talk about conception of the, philosophy of the piece and, all those great verbal kind of description of the style and piece. But, then the students understand it. Yes, it's great, but how you actually do it, how you make this color coming out, yes. And I think this is the most important thing, because that's the great teacher should help you with, right? And so I was very lucky that I got this training. And it is true that Russian school is based on that, particular technique of very relaxed body, the weight from the shoulder, and that going through your arm without, Maria Yudina, one of the greatest pianists, she described, I read recently, she described arms like a hoses, through which the water goes from the shoulder. And, as soon as you close somewhere the hose, the water stops, right? So I really loved this, because sometimes you're trying to explain your students about this weight and everything. And this is really great, because as soon as you close in your elbow, this hose, the water stops, or in your wrist or anywhere, right? So she described it as the hose through what the water goes to the fingertip. And it was like such a great metaphor, which describes a little bit of Russian school. And it's a lot of cultivation of the tone quality of the sound. It's like a really big thing in Russian school, beautiful singing tone, relaxed arm, weight through the shoulder, kind of drop, a lot of types of articulations and color, most importantly, color, that you have different layers of, layers of different sound, different colors, and you kind of hear all of those differences. So, and of course, how you achieve those virtuosic difficulty in the pieces, because, it's easy to say, just go and practice, right? But it's very important to explain how efficiency you can practice and how you can achieve physically certain things. And I was very lucky to go through this training. I'm really grateful to my teachers. So yeah, I do feel like I can see that Russian school from far away, like, oh yeah, this is what I was taught, or how I understand things, or, even though when I came to New York and I was exposed to all those great musicians, students, teachers, you kind of start opening your mind and be more kind of, inclusive in a way, in styles, and you borrow certain things. You can be influenced by certain things, being very open-minded, and sometimes influenced in some styles, like, for example, playing Bach. There's I find a little bit different perception of Bach in Russian school and Bach in German or other schools. And you can definitely borrow certain things, because of the stylistic differences of, the composer. So yeah, but I definitely can see some kind of consistency in what Russian pianists, how they operate, how they.
Yeah. Oh, I was just, thinking as you were talking, there's so much to unpack, maybe I can ask you specifically about one thing, and that's the Russian word, intonatia, and which is really hard to kind of translate into English. Some people call it like expressive inflection, or they're just like these weird, but it's really difficult to translate. But I am wondering if you could talk about that a little bit more. What is really intonatia in, and how does it translate, into your playing, specifically? This whole idea of, I think Rachmaninoff had that, right? The whole idea of like melody as speech, and sort of you kind of, infuse, and I think we could see that very well in your playing, in the etude. You kind of, infuse every kind of note of a melody with expressivity, So when you have a large interval, you take a little bit more time. right? When there is kind of like a moment of tension, that chord kind of is voiced differently than if you were kind of playing a chord that kind of means more like a resolution. So I'm wondering, if you could talk about that a little bit. I know it's a big topic too, but things like legato, voicing. What is really intonatia? I mean, if a student asks you, what do you say?
Well, I would maybe connect this a little bit to more familiar word for students as phrasing, because how you connect one note to another and how you actually combine them into some sentence, into some phrase is very important. And, when I studied, and I also, when I practice, when I teach my students, I pay a lot of attention to that arch of, smaller details and then bigger details in terms of the phrasing and in terms of the tone and how you connect between the sounds, because one of the things that Russian school is famous with is this very, it can be very critical because you work on so many nuances and details. Like when I would come to my teacher working very hard on something, and I knew that I improved a lot, but there would be still millions of things that still needed to be done. So, in terms of the sound, in terms of this nuance and that detail and this movements of your hand. And so it's great because this way you grow all the time. It can be a little bit, intimidating because there is never end. There is never satisfaction moment of, okay, everything is great. But yeah, there is a lot of details in approach, I would say. I think it took me years to get rid of being very self-critical because of that. Because, when after you perform, you always look for the half empty, for those moments, those nuances that didn't come out well, So, yeah, I think that's how I would describe Russian school. It's a lot about the sound, the color, the phrasing, the legato, creating beautiful legato colors.
That's fascinating, actually, because now I'm just thinking back my childhood and my education and then the later experiences. The words like color, nuances, those came, I think, actually later for me. A lot of my experience in Korea, I studied up to college in Korea. It was about just you go practice more, make it more even, or like don't make mistakes. It was very much along those lines. And then, every now and then sing more here, or, just a little vague or not a lot about these nuances. And then now I'm thinking about one of my favorite Russian pianists. When he plays the beginning of Rock 3, it's like it's such a simple melody, but I think that's what you're talking about. It's like so many different things are going on with those like just thirds and then scale, and then it's such simple unison melody. But I guess if you think about those things from very early on, that how different that would be. It's just really, how do I say, illuminating for me to actually hear about that aspect, because I knew about the weight and the relaxation of the arm and the hose concept. I've heard of that too, but again, these things came relatively later for me, and then I try to teach it as early as possible, when I meet my students. But yeah, so that's really cool to hear.
And I'm wondering, how much this whole, because the Russian school really seems to be one of the kind of, most kind of intact, when you talk about it, because because of, what Russia was, it was really so far away from Europe, and there were, of course, contacts, but it really over the centuries and decades, the last century for sure, it really had kind of time to develop, in its own kind of integrity. And I was kind of looking for some interesting quotes, to kind of to bring to the podcast. And I was reading about Rachmaninoff, about his own experiences, you know, as a pianist, and I just want to read something because maybe that could move us a little bit further, you know, from this idea of like detailed technical stuff, you know, to kind of more broader understanding, you know, of what interpretation is about. So anyway, this, if you don't mind, I'm going to read this. So Rachmaninoff says, interpretation demands something of the creative instinct. If you are a composer, you have an affinity with other composers. You can make contact with their imaginations, knowing something of their problems and their ideals. You can give their work out a color. This is the most important thing to me in my pianoforte playing, color. Without color, there is no music.
Yeah,
And
I
I thought this,
agree. I agree. You
yeah,
know, it's actually interesting because I also read about Horowitz, who was, you know, always they told him that he was amazing at technique and everything. He said, technique? Well, I mean, what is it? Playing scales? I'm getting bored from playing scales. For
yeah.
me, he said, technique is how many different sounds you can pull out from the piano, the color.
Mhm.
That's for him was technique. And I totally agree because, you know, when people say, well, they have such great technique, their fingers run so fast, you know, in terms of acrobatic, but even when you play scale, there are different ways, right? You're not going to play Beethoven's scale, play scales in Beethoven the same as you're going to play scale in Chopin or Rachmaninoff, right? It's always a little different nuance to it. Or Bach, it's very different articulation, different, you know, sound quality, different, even physicality, the way you do it, right? So we play, like, let's say we play scales, but then when we transfer those scales to the music, it can feel and very different for each music, each piece. And, you know, so it is, I totally agree. Yeah, it's much more, I mean, there's so many good pianists these days who play very fast and you're like, wow, this guy is practicing a lot, so much acrobatics and everything. When I listen, I'm looking for, I don't want to hear too many notes, like I'm impressed with too many notes. When something is really clicking there and I'm like, wow, you know, it has to go inside to me. So that's how I was taught myself. That's how what I'm looking when I am practicing, when I'm performing, and what I'm looking for my students. You know, it's more of a little something deeper, color and sound. And
But then how do you teach? And also, do you teach your students to play scales in different ways? You know, like practice the scale?
you know, I do. Well, when you teach scales, of course, you want first of all just to teach them technically to be free in terms of getting the right physicality. How, you know, there are certain things that you want to make sure your elbow, your you know, shoulder, your wrist, your first finger, and then already during the music. Of course, you can explain different articulation while doing all that. But then during the music, at least that's how I teach, it's all connects to the music. You want it connect to the musical idea and then how you're implementing this musical idea physically. So in other words, it doesn't have to be all physicality in terms of, but first that the color you want to achieve. Now, how are you going to achieve the color? You know, you can do that, and that will give you this sound. Or, you know, if you want some passage, why don't you do this? And then it's going to be, you know, it always has to be connected to musical idea in terms of that. It's not going to be just boring, some exercise, but motivating musically.
And when you do that, with the student, do you approach with a lot of demonstration, or do you try to verbally explain, or
I know some people, yeah, I know some people, they don't like when it's too much demonstration and too much physicality. I was brought up like this. I do myself, I truly believe in that. And it worked in my experience for me, for my students. So I do have a lot of physicality in my teaching. It's a lot of explanation, demonstration, you know, because I see how it works. I see sometimes students who struggle and they practice, and you see they practiced a lot, but they didn't do the right thing. So you feel sorry for them, like you wasted all this time. Why don't you just do that? And they do it, and then suddenly it works, you know. So I don't believe how you can teach without that physical approach. So I truly believe in that. And some people say, well, they start to look like you. I said, you know, fine. That's why I teach them, right? So it's my school. I guess that's, but I truly believe in that, because it's really sometimes magic. I was very impressed myself when I had that kind of teachers who would just show me some magic, and it's like, wow, yeah, amazing, you know. So, and of course, it's all connects to music. It's not just, it's why we want to create that color, that particular moment. Yes, we want. How? Oh, you know, and then you physically explain, point out to certain things, and it works, and it's get excited, and then it's built up. That, I mean, I evolving myself all the time. The more I perform, the more I find things to myself. The more I understand how little I knew, let's say, before, and how absolutely nothing I knew before. I'm learning all the time. I'm evolving. I play sometimes same pieces that I played for many years, and every time is like, wow, that's what it is.
Right.
That's, you know, every time is different, and that's why it's so exciting. Our profession and what we do is so exciting because it's never boring. It's, you always look for, it's never, it's like exploration all the time.
And you can always go to the next level, you know.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel like I'm just learning, I'm just evolving, I'm just growing, like a, you know, almost like, but it's more fun because with all experience of stage, of learning, of playing so much, it's much more fun to grow. But yeah, absolutely.
Wonderful, yeah. And I think that's why it's important for teacher, as a teacher, I think it's very good that I still perform a lot, because like you were saying, you learn so much by just performing more.
Oh yeah.
Right? And then you
I think it's great to have, it's great to have teacher who performs, because you know, they just go through the same sometimes things, you know, and they can help you. Absolutely.
So I wonder, I'm thinking, you know, back, you know, to Rachmaninoff, you know, and his idea, well, you have to have a creative mind, right? You know, without a creative mind, you know, you're not going to be a good pianist, you know. And I think he continues with this idea that, you know, performers should be also composers, and, you know, and he kind of bemoans the fact that, you know, people don't compose anymore, which is a different topic completely. But, you know, Jihye and I think we had a guest some while back, and we talked, you know, about the fact that sometimes we listen to young pianists, you know, and they can sound really accomplished and polished, you know. The notes are all there, you know, they play with very little tension, it's kind of very comfortable, but they almost play as if they speak a foreign language that they kind of memorized, and language that they kind of don't, you know what I mean, language they really don't understand, so they kind of recite something without actually getting the meaning of it. You know, they don't really understand the syntax. You know, they have memorized it well, you know, and it's like, you know, they listen to recordings a lot and they repeat, you know, what they hear in recordings, but they don't seem to have that creative spark that makes you think, like, you know, what Jihye said, you know, and what you said, you know, you begin you know, the opening, you know, of the third Rachmaninoff concerto, and there is magic, right? So what do you do with a student who has it all, who has the physical abilities, you know, who can play scales really fast and really evenly, who has a good understanding of sound and balance, all that, but doesn't have that creative spark? Do you tell people, oh, you know, if you want to play Rachmaninoff well, you have to listen to his songs, you have to listen to his symphonies? Do you try to kind of broaden their horizons, or do you just focus mostly on the pianistic aspect?
No, I think if luckily they already have pianistic aspects, like you said, that, you know, you don't really have, because many students, they don't have, so you actually want to move their musical, but they're lacking that pianistic abilities. So if they do have, and if they have good school, maybe, good enough school, then it's great. You can talk much more about, the musical aspects. And yeah, listening is great, but I usually do a lot of personalization of the music, in terms of getting some kind of message that is close to the student, and listening in terms of the orchestration. I played a lot of chamber music, and that coloristic approach in terms of the instrumentation sometimes really works. I mean, I've done a lot of even like simple teaching when you have the accompaniment. Some students, they accompany some very simple accompaniment to melody, and they really underestimate it because, it's not important, it's just the accompaniment, right? When I told the student, I said, listen, this is accompaniment, but let's say it's a cellist, he's playing an ensemble, and this cellist, he's going to go home and he's going to practice only this accompaniment to make sure it's perfect and it's all even and it's beautiful, because this is and he loves music, right? So he's going to be doing that accompaniment only. Imagine, it just completely changes the story. So the students start to listening completely different, that part of the, that's a very simple example, but I think that kind of approach of very different hearing the colors rather than just notes and some kind of technical things, but try to get to those different layers of hearing the music, emotional message, personalizing some personal emotional message. I mean, like to color the picture, you have a beautiful picture, but now you need to put the colors. So sometimes it can be fun. You kind of create it, how you get into the soul, into the heart of a student, to make it a little bit more personal and deep and colorful. It's actually fun. I think it's actually it would be more fun for me than the opposite. When a person very musical but just not capable, so you need to go back and just do the basics.
But that's actually that's kind of painful.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Right.
But
That
this
can be, yeah.
because I want to learn Scriabin Sonata. That's my next piece that I need to play. I want to go to New York and play for you. Maybe you will like dig into
Oh, I'm sure you can do well without me. Yeah, sure. Oh, Scriabin is one of my very, very favorite composers, honestly.
yeah.
And I mean, I was studying a few pieces with my teachers in Israel. I mean, Victor Derevyanko, who was a student of Neuhaus, he was studying Fifth Sonata with Neuhaus, and in Moscow with all this. And I remember having those amazing experiences with those teachers, where you kind of seeing that composer in such a special way with all these colors and all these ideas, all extra musical ideas. And you can just really kind of get into his mind and connect it to music. It's so fascinating. I love Scriabin, late Scriabin, early Scriabin. It's one of my favorite composers, totally. Yes.
I am. No.
Well, we don't have a Scriabin recording on tap, but there are
David,
Scriabin recordings on.
You took some recording of my wrong Chopin that I said. I sent you different Chopin. You took some.
I think I made a mistake. Yes,
that
they were
not even make it.
but it seems like people really loved it. There were like wonderful reactions to it. So
All right.
okay, I'm not going to mess up. I promise. So maybe we should do the Gershwin Wild right now. Yeah, that'd be okay.
Oh, sure.
Just listen for a bit, and we can move to the next topics, because we want to talk to you about composers, about your programs, how you build programs and composers that are close to your heart. So, but let's listen first. Beautiful. Such a great piece.
At the end,
Yeah, it is a great piece.
yeah, it is. I mean, I only play the Embraceable You, but this one I want to
Yeah.
learn now. But I'm curious, at the very end, is it written for the elbow like that?
Yeah, well, basically you can extend, you can do a little bit long. It's black notes, you're covering black notes and it sounds really good. So if you do this, if you do, you go in a little bit
Yeah.
further register. Yeah, but it's black notes. Yeah, and the last note that you know it's C flat.
Beautiful playing, really, yeah.
Thank
And
you.
it just
So maybe we can switch gears a little bit and talk about programs and musical careers and like broader topics, which always interest young students who are in school and they're just thinking about, okay, so I will graduate in a few years, and what am I going to do as a as a pianist? And I'm kind of looking at you, Olga, and Jihye, and you're kind of the two most successful freelancers that I know. You always have projects, you always have ideas and things going on, and I really admire that, because I mostly these days move in the academic circles, and people in academia don't do as much, obviously. So I'm just wondering, maybe we can start with composers and with music that you are drawn to. What would be your ideal program that you would like to play tomorrow? Recital program.
You asking me?
Yeah.
Ideal program. That's a good question. I don't know. I mean, I have so many pieces that I love to play, and I actually like switching programs just for varieties, because I played so many different programs, and I have one role for myself. Whichever program I play next, I'm in love with that program. This is my favorite program. It just makes me more excited. And there's one thing that every program is different depending on where I go and what audience I will have, because I really considering that I would not just go, if I play in one venue, let's say very intellectual program for professionals or for musicians that really understand. I'm not going to just take that program because I need to run through and go to some random audience and play it, because I really want to reach out to the audience, and the wider our audience is, the better for us. So I always consider what audience will be there. And if I go to places where it can be just random listener, I always looking for contrasts. I like some theme. I don't just usually, sometimes just throw pieces around, but I like some theme that I can maybe focus on or maybe talk about, whether it's genre, whether it's style, or, but I like contrast in the program, so it will kind of catch the attention of the listener and, give a little bit more perspectives of classical music. So there is differences. Obviously I love Russian music, but I do a lot of, sometimes I throw some spices in the program, like contemporary piece or, jazz influence, like those Gershwin, for example. Transcriptions are wonderful. There are some contemporary pieces which are also kind of jazz oriented. So I like to throw the variety into the program. I did a lot of only contemporary programs, which is only living composers. Even in those programs, I also would kind of focus on variety and contrast. So yeah, I don't think I have my ideal favorite program, because I've done too many programs too. I don't want to offend any of others. This is my favorite and this is not my favorite. They're all the favorites at the time that I played. So I would put it this way.
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting, to think about the different guests, we had on the webcast, because some people have very specific ideas, what they like to play and what they really would not touch, and then And it's really interesting to see, how different people, which different people, what different people do gravitate, towards in terms of music. And of course, with you, it seems to be, a lot of romantic music, naturally, even though you play everything. You play Scarlatti, you play Beethoven, and you play a lot of contemporary music as well. And maybe I can ask you about that a little bit, because I know that you have collaborated with composers quite a bit, in the past. And it's kind of, again, a running topic, in the podcast. Jihye plays a lot of contemporary music, so we had a little discussion with her about it, and she always voices a lot of joy and frustrations with working with composers. How was it for you? Do you enjoy actually working with living composers? How do these collaborations come about, and is it something that's really satisfying for you artistically?
I started playing contemporary music a few years ago. And it was in the beginning, I mean, when I was at school, like usually everybody would play just 1-2 pieces a year, maybe like really contemporary, if any. And I remember my teacher actually would say, why don't you play something really contemporary? And I would like, look at him, really? And I like without really appreciating it. But then when I started to play many concerts and some suggestion of playing contemporary music, I started to delve into it a little bit more. And in the beginning, it was completely foreign language for me, especially some pieces that would take so much time just to go through rhythms and the language and all of that. And I was, oh my God, I could already learn 3 Chopin pieces or something, right? But the more you play, the more fascinating it starts to become, because you kind of like learning completely new language, new sonorities, and you start switching your attention from something that you're so comfortable with and to something very different. Like when I played those pieces with unconventional ways of piano playing, I was fascinated, like George Crumb, when I did few of his Macrocosmos books. I was just fascinated of how much, and nobody thinks how precise those composers sometimes can be. When you look at the score, they're going so into the depths of all the little nuance, and in the beginning you think like, what is going on here? But then when you learn about it and you really try to do what is written, it's really fascinating. Another piece I played by Andy Akiho, a great American young composer, I think rising star, also for prepared piano. You're supposed to put the nickel in between the strings, and the sonority that it would bring is completely amazing. Like it was such a beautiful piece. I remember when Critic is coming to the concert and there's one piece of those type with prepared piano, Crumb, all attention would go to that piece with all the praises and all that, because it is something so different and so exciting. And I absolutely loved this experience. I did some premieres of chamber music. I played a premiere by Justin Delajoye and Raj Baran with wonderful, wonderful musicians. So it was really great experience. And it's tough because composer was there and probably he knows that I just missed the note. Sometimes they don't.
Sometimes not. Sometimes not.
But sometimes not. But you feel pressure, right? Because you think, oh my God, I did something really wrong. Probably he's cursing me right now. But they're usually very happy. I mean, the composers I worked with were very happy and very grateful. I played with many composers. I did recording a couple of years ago of Victoria Blunt, who I recorded a couple of pieces, and many other composers. I really loved working with composers contemporary. It's very hard work. So sometimes, I used to work very hard. Now I'm a little bit more lazy, but it's great. I love it.
Yeah. I think actually when the music, you were saying about how even with the prepared different kind of sonority. There are so many nuances that you can go about.
Yes.
I think that's what I enjoy most about working with good composer on a good piece, because then really it's like about the details and the like little markings that I pay attention to all of those. But even with all of my attention and intention, sometimes I miss those little things. And then the great thing about working with a composer is that he or she can tell me, right, like, can you do just a little bit more of that? Or like there will be little something that I didn't even look, and then he's
Right.
telling me, yeah, that has to be like really like this. And then that makes me actually think about other pieces, the more
Yes.
traditional pieces. And then all those markings that those composers put, like, am I really paying attention to those and bring everything to life? And I think that's what I learned actually by working with a composer who can tell me all about what they are imagining, what they want to hear. So,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, I know. I always feel like people who play new music are just better musicians in general. I mean, there's again, this is something we touched on in the past. Because there are pianists, of course, who wouldn't touch new music, right? We talk about Mari Pariah, who said, I cannot play new music, because if I play something else, it kind of changes the way I think about my piano sound. I can't really deal with like modern syntax because I think it would like corrupt the way I think about music. But then we spoke about I think I quoted the Boulez the Boulez, and that's when he said, well, I love working with the Chicago Symphony because they play so much new music really well. So when you work with them on a Mahler symphony, just their technical and expressive abilities just expand. And I think it's really true with pianists too, the ones who can really kind of tackle a difficult complicated modern piece. I think they take that experience and bring the attention to other music as well, and it can have really great results. So there's a little bit of that. But I'm wondering, like, moving forward, so you say you're always trying to create exciting programs with a lot of contrast. So when you say contrast, Olga, you mean contrast, stylistic contrast, or contrast like emotional contrast? Would you play a concert that would be only Chopin or only romantic Russian music? uh,
Oh
how would you
yeah.
do it?
I actually Chopin has so much contrast in my
Mhm.
opinion. I
Yeah.
mean, and you can't go wrong with Chopin, right? All Chopin program has become all can
Mm.
imagine. Well, it can be any contrast. It can be emotional contrast. It can be stylistical contrast.
Mm.
It can be, sonority wise. I mean, let's say if you put together a contemporary program, right? There is someone like Crump, and there is maybe someone who is more traditional, or there is somebody. So you want to kind of, again, it depends on the audience, because sometimes if people came and they are prepared, they're ready for maybe one style or one composer, I have no problem with that. All Beethoven program.
Mm.
Nothing can be wrong with all Beethoven program, right? But there, even in all Beethoven programs, I would look for maybe emotional contrast, maybe just to give the listener sort of like switch, um, yeah, when you listen to the music, you want to keep your attention all the time. You want that the listener will kind of like, yeah, be with you, and
Mm.
to feel that energy from the audience. For me, I really, I haven't played live concerts for a long time now, since pandemic, right? And just recently when I went back to play live concert, it was like, oh, so great, because you feel the audience, you feel that energy. It's something very special. And I think one of the things that, for me, important is that switch of the contrast, that you can, it can be just emotional, like you say, if you play all Chopin program, there's so much variety in Chopin music. So that's can be as well.
Actually, can I actually, now that you talked about how you haven't played live concerts for a long time and now you're just slowly getting back to it. And I watched some of your videos that were made at home, right? With creative lightings and stuff like that. Can you just share a little bit about your experience during the last 14 months? What made you decide to create those videos at home? What else did you do to cope with this, sort of like disconnect from the stage in a way? Do you share some
Yeah.
experience?
Yeah, well, I mean, when pandemic started, I was professionally completely devastated because I had really beautifully lined up season. I worked very hard to put together some tours, some concerts, and I was like in February, wow, it looks good. I have so many exciting programs and concerts, and suddenly everything collapses. At first, of course, it was very disappointing, but my mental state was okay, but everybody's healthy. All my loved ones are here with me and everybody's good. Everything is good, calm down, no problem. But I needed some food for my soul, and then I started to get some proposals of virtual concerts that were scheduled, and they were kind enough to, on the same conditions, just do it virtually. So I said, okay, I need to look for the stage. And I have a wonderful husband who's very resourceful and very handy and just, and he said, okay, let's do it at home. I said, how we can do it at home? I mean, it's not gonna. So he said, let's do it. So we started to research. I mean, he started to research about how to do the lighting, how to do the cameras, the editing, the sound, the microphone, everything. And yeah, we started experiencing, and it really worked. Then we were improving. So I did over 2 dozens of concerts. I mean, really, really many concerts pre-recorded and live streamed from my home. And some of them were pretty, in terms of again, production, because of my husband, was pretty good. People would not have believed that it was just done at my home, because of so yeah. And I started to, I kept myself in shape for those concerts, because playing for the camera, it's even more responsible because it's documented and you will have to watch it. And so and I'm the biggest critic, so you better be prepared. So it kind of, and it was such a creative process because we were together in it. I was playing and he was putting all and then we were watching and editing together. So it was really exciting. And I'm not the person of a video. I usually play concerts, and even if there is a camera and it's recorded, I would say, okay, I will watch it later. And of course, I'm getting busy, I never watch it. And suddenly I said, okay, I have to be friendly with the camera. It's all good, just enjoy it. So yeah, and it was a great experience because first of all, we learned how to do it.
Right.
I started to do video recordings from home, and I kept playing and playing concerts. It never like the live experience, but it's better than nothing. And yeah, it was exciting moment and some kind of good news for us.
Do you think you'll keep doing it even if, things become more normal, things go back to normal? Do you think you will keep this aspect alive?
Well, I know how to, so that's good, right? So yes, probably. I still have a couple of projects to record and to, but I think, yes, I think, if there is something interesting to record, to share, that and it's available. I worked on you actually showed my clip, which was my first productions with untuned piano, and was not good. Then in summer, I rebuilt the piano, and in fall, we already upgraded everything. We added a camera, and my piano sounded better. So yeah, I will continue doing that. Absolutely. I think people discovered something very unique now, because you can reach out to much bigger audiences. I have relatives who were complaining, when you come to our living in different countries. When you come to us so we can hear you playing. I said, yeah, one day, where are your recordings? I said, I don't like to, finally said, oh, finally we can hear you playing, so it's an advantage in a way because you can reach to wider audiences like this virtually. So
Absolutely. I think that is one silver lining, so to speak, of this whole pandemic era. A lot of technological learning happened, I think, among musicians, and a lot of us have sort of embraced
yeah,
either like really
right.
fully or in part. And I hope and I think it will play for the better in the long term. So
Yeah.
not all was lost, I feel. And you are a great example of that. So
Oh.
yeah.
Just one of the examples.
We are slowly running out of time, but I would like to play one more recording and actually talk to you, Olga, a little bit about chamber music, because we touched on a few aspects of it, but maybe because this is such an important part of who you are, as a musician. So I think, we should listen to a movement, from the Tanev Piano Quintet, and then talk a little bit more about that. And I have one or two questions from our viewers also, so we can maybe do that as well.
Sure.
But let's listen to the Tanev first.
God, that's such an amazing piece. I don't actually know this piece. It's so great and wonderful playing, really. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, this is a great, great piece. It's like one of those majestic pieces. It's like a piano concerto, which lasts 45, 50 minutes, I think 50
Huh?
minutes even. This is the second scherzo, but it's really very, very difficult piece in every aspect, in terms of the parts, in terms of the ensemble and you know, balance, everything. But it's like tremendously well kind of written, and it's a gorgeous piece. Yeah.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it.
Study this. Yeah. Really.
We actually have a question from one of our listeners who wants to remain anonymous, so I won't reveal her name. And then she's a question about chamber music and about so what she's asking is how important is it for you to play chamber music and how difficult it is to adjust to playing with different players all the time.
For me, it's one of the most important experience that happened in my life, that I started to play a lot of chamber music. It's so important in so many aspects because you just start listening very differently to your own playing, because you have this, you know, that very different perspective of the sound, of the color, of the timbres, because you're playing with different instruments and you listen to each one and you kind of combine, you know, all these sonorities into one musical body. And it is such a unique experience. And I mean, I'm very grateful that I had an experience to play with amazing musicians, chamber music. You know, one of my, I played with different groups, different instruments. You know, I was very fortunate to have really great experience at a great venue in New York, Barge Music, and the artistic director, Mark Piscanov, was very kind, inviting me to play so many really amazing programs with first-class musicians. And that gave me, I think, one of the most exciting experiences of my life. Because playing with great musicians, not only you know, you learn so much. You learn from string instruments just how you're listening to their. You know, our instrument is considered to be percussive, but it can sing. It can really beautifully sing. And I think playing with string instruments or wind instrument that naturally are string and, you know, have the singing tone, can you can benefit from this tremendously, because you, like I said, I always tell my students and to myself that this is one instrument. I don't see it like right hand melody. This is, let's say, flute or violin, and this is cello. You know, this Chopin etude, this is like a cello part. Absolutely, there is absolutely an inevitable cello sound. And I think that experience of playing chamber music brings you that very colorful understanding and comprehension of the music. And if you have those opportunities to play with great musicians, you just learn so much as a, you know. So yes, play as many opportunities as you can, if you can. I definitely recommend it.
Yeah, and I think, you know, that's probably your experience, Jihye, too, because I remember talking to you, know, about playing with different musicians, playing new music, you know, which is like, which adds another level of
Oh,
difficulty to it, you know, when you're like, you know,
Oh, yeah.
exploring something.
I remember when I played
Mhm.
chamber music on contemporary with contemporary pieces. Oh my God, we rehearsed like 3 times more than a regular repertoire. It was so frustrating and time consuming, but you know, it's exciting because you're just delving into those little details and nuances, and it's great. Yeah.
Right.
I have one more question. It's kind of a mundane one, but it's important. How much do you practice per day? Do you still practice scales and etudes?
Oh, well, I mean, you know, it depends. I When I perform a lot and rehearse, I don't count how much. I guess in my mind I practice a lot, but yeah, I depends. I try to practice every day at least some. You know, I try to play all the time, whether virtually or so. I try to keep myself in shape. And sometimes it comes together to big amount, but I don't really count. If you have rehearsals, if you have performance, and you have, sometimes I play 2 concerts per day. So I try not to practice as much. I just kind of play concerts, you know, when I go on tour. So I sometimes schedule some day concert and evening concert. So I don't count how much really I play per day. Regarding scales, I mean, I have a lot of scales and all kind of passages in the pieces. So I guess I just kind of handle that in music. I was never a really disciplined scale player. Maybe it's not good. I guess it's not good, but I just, you know, I was always looking for something like this in music. So, but it's good. It's very satisfying playing scales, you know, especially if you're getting into the shape and if you have a good quality of scales, it's great. I mean, it's, yeah, so.
Well, you have very good scales.
Huh?
You have very good scales.
Yeah, that's
Oh,
right.
thank you.
There's so many of them.
Maybe not good enough.
Yeah, we had a debate about this with Jihye a couple times, you know, because I get really upset about something that happened in at a school I used to teach, you know, where some people decided that it's not important for students to play scales, and I felt it was a mistake, you know, because you're kind of, you know, giving up an important part of your technique, you know, especially for students, you know, who really haven't done a lot of repertoire. But
No, you have to go through scales, of course,
yeah.
in your life. I'm not talking about not playing them at all.
Yeah.
I mean, we all know, like in Russian training, you always had all the scales, you had tests, you needed to play all of them, arpeggio, chord scales, everything. It just was part of you. Yeah, like you can't have a good kind of musical training without passing through that. Just build up your. Yeah, I'm talking about already when you're getting old. that hard. So.
Yeah, I think we'll need to wrap up slowly because, but you know, I really hope that, you know, we'll find a way how to bring you back, because my dream is, you know, one day to find a way how to do like a workshop on, you know,
Yeah.
on sound, you know, and
Sure,
on
yeah,
just
that would be
aspects
great.
of playing, because I think I'll work on that, because I think it'll be really nice, especially, you know, going back, you know, to the ideas of intonatia and of the sort of, you know, what is really the Russian sound, because I think it's very difficult to explain to people who really haven't experienced it. And, you know, and hopefully we'll be able to do some kind of like a hands-on, you know, seminar. So, you know, I hope you'll be willing to join us if that ever happens.
That would be so fabulous if we go to Prague in person. And
Oh yeah.
then the possibility that happened with the corona, we could actually stream it, right? We could have something in person, but also people who cannot physically be there may be able to watch it. That
Yeah.
would be wonderful.
Prague anytime, one of my favorite places. I mean, this is one of the very rare places that I had all my experience going to Prague, and I had many, were amazing. And in terms of the meeting people, playing, hospitality is just one of my favorite places to go, truly. So
yeah, we
let's
could
hope.
never bring you to the festival, but it's true that, you know, you have played many concerts there, you know. So
Yeah,
hopefully one day
I
this
love Prague.
will line up. Olga, it was so good to have you. Thank you so much for
It was
spending time with us.
pleasure. My
And
pleasure.
so Olga Vinokur was our guest. You know, please visit her website. We'll provide all the links. You know, she has many recordings on her YouTube channel, even the correct one of the Chopin Etude, which I did not play. So you can actually visit that one as well. And there are actually many others. So please learn about her playing and about what she does. Jihye, thank you so much again for your thoughtful questions and your involvement. And we hope to see you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thank you. It was very nice meeting you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.